Rewire your mind for success. The neuroscientist could not sleep because of a thought he could not stop thinking. Not a new thought. That was the specific thing that made it remarkable to him in the way that someone who studies the brain professionally can find a thought remarkable. He had been thinking this thought, in various forms, for 11 years. He had examined it from multiple intellectual angles. Had discussed it with colleagues. Had read the relevant literature. Had, in the specific way of the highly trained intellectual who has thoroughly processed something without genuinely living it, understood it with considerable precision. He had not changed. His name was Dr. Samuel Reyes. He was 49 years old. He was, by every professional measure available, genuinely accomplished. His research on neuroplasticity, on the specific, biological, measurable capacity of the human brain to physically reorganize itself in response to experience and practice, had been published in journals whose acceptance rates made publication a genuine achievement. He had taught this material to hundreds of students. Had explained the mechanisms with the specific, compelling clarity of someone who understood them deeply and could communicate them well. He had explained, to student after student and colleague after colleague, that the brain is not fixed. That the neural pathways are not permanent structures that determine the person's capacity for the remainder of their life. That the specific patterns of thought and behavior that constitute what most people call personality and character and the way they are, these patterns are the product of specific neural structures that are genuinely, measurably, biologically capable of being changed through specific, sustained, genuinely practiced engagement with different patterns of thought and behavior. He had explained this. He had believed it. He had the research to support it and the professional authority to communicate it with complete credibility. And his own patterns of thought, the specific, chronic, entirely recognizable patterns that had been shaping his choices and his relationships and his professional development and his interior experience of being alive for as long as he could clearly remember, had not changed in any fundamental way in 11 years of knowing that change was biologically possible. The thought he could not stop thinking was, why? Not why was it biologically possible. He knew that. Not why was it important. He knew that too. Why, knowing everything he knew with the professional precision he had developed, was he still the same person in the specific interior ways that he had known for 11 years he should not still be? He lay in the dark and held the question with the genuine, uncomfortable quality of someone who has just realized that the gap between understanding something and living it is not bridged by more understanding. That something else is required. Something that 11 years of professional engagement with the neuroscience of change had not provided. He found it in an unlikely place. Not in the laboratory or in the journals or in the professional literature that had been the primary resource for 11 years. In a worn paperback copy of the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius that his wife had left on the nightstand 6 months earlier and that he had been ignoring with the specific, comfortable condescension of someone who has spent 20 years studying the brain scientifically and who considers pre-scientific philosophical texts interesting historically but not professionally relevant. He picked it up at 2 in the morning. He read it until 5. What he found was not what he expected. He had expected the general philosophical content. The broad wisdom about how to live and what to value and the specific historical context that makes ancient texts interesting to read. He found something considerably more specific and considerably more practically relevant to the question that had been keeping him awake. He found the most detailed, practically precise, personally conducted experiment in neural rewiring that pre-neuroscience humanity had produced. Not described in those terms. Described in the philosophical terms of the 2nd century Roman emperor who was conducting it without the vocabulary of the 21st century neuroscientist who was reading it. But recognizably, unmistakably, with the specific quality of someone who understood from direct experience something that Dr. Reyes had been explaining from research for 11 years without genuinely doing it himself. Marcus Aurelius was rewiring his mind. Daily. Specifically. With the practiced, patient, continuous, genuinely effortful engagement with different patterns of thought that the neuroscience describes as the mechanism of genuine neural change and that the Meditations documents in the most intimate available detail. He was not just thinking about changing. He was practicing the changed thought. Daily. In the specific, repeated, consistently maintained way that the neuroscience requires for the physical reorganization of the brain's actual structure to genuinely occur. Dr. Reyes put the book down at 5 in the morning and sat in the early darkness with the specific quality of recognition that only arrives when something genuinely important has been genuinely understood for the first time rather than merely known in the familiar, undemanding, entirely untransformative way it had been known before. He had been explaining the practice to other people for 11 years without doing the practice himself. He had been teaching the mechanism without engaging the mechanism. He had been describing the rewiring without rewiring anything. That morning, he began. Not with a new research project. Not with a professional intervention. With the specific, practical, entirely personal practice that Marcus Aurelius had been documenting in the 2nd century and that the 21st century neuroscience had confirmed was the mechanism through which genuine neural change actually occurs. The daily, specific, consistently maintained practice of thinking differently. Not thinking about thinking differently. Actually thinking the different thought. Practicing the different response. Engaging the different pattern. In the specific, effortful, repeated way that the brain requires in order to build the new pathway that the different thought becomes the default. This is what we are exploring today. The complete, philosophically grounded, neuroscientifically supported, practically applicable understanding of what rewiring your mind for success actually means, what it actually requires, and what the specific daily practices of genuine neural rewiring actually produce in the person willing to do them genuinely rather than just understand them intellectually. This is Stoic Ascension. Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on your notifications because every single video here is built for exactly this depth and exactly this quality of genuine engagement. The kind that bridges the specific gap between understanding what needs to change and actually doing the work that changes it. What comes after this builds directly on everything you are about to hear. Do not miss what is coming. What rewiring your mind actually means, the complete understanding. Rewiring your mind is a phrase that has been so thoroughly absorbed into the language of self-improvement culture that most people who use it have never examined what it actually means with sufficient precision to produce anything more than a vague aspiration toward being different in some general way. The vague aspiration toward being different is not rewiring. It is the comfortable contemplation of rewiring. The intellectually engaging consideration of what it would mean to think differently without the specific, effortful, sustained practice that the actual rewiring requires. Rewiring, in the precise sense that the neuroscience describes and that the Stoic philosophical practices embody, is the specific, physical, biologically real process through which the brain's actual structure changes. Through which the neural pathways that constitute the habitual patterns of thought and response, the patterns that are the biological substrate of what people experience as their personality, their character, their automatic way of engaging with the world, are actually, measurably, permanently altered. The mechanism is Hebbian learning. Named after the neuropsychologist Donald Hebb, who described it with the phrase that has become the most concise available summary of the process: neurons that fire together wire together. The neural pathways that are repeatedly activated, the thought patterns that are repeatedly engaged, the response patterns that are repeatedly practiced, the specific cognitive sequences that are repeatedly run, these pathways become stronger, more efficient, more automatically available as the default response to the stimuli that trigger them. This is why the habitual thought patterns feel like the natural ones. Not because they are natural in any fixed or inevitable sense. Because they have been practiced. Because the neural pathways that constitute them have been strengthened by repeated activation until the pathway is so well established and so efficiently connected that the thought or the response arrives with the specific, automatic, effortless quality of something that is simply how the person is rather than what the person has practiced. The extraordinary implication, the one that Dr. Reyes had been explaining for 11 years without genuinely living, is that this process works for any pattern. Including the new ones. Including the patterns that currently feel unnatural because they have not been practiced. Including the specific thoughts and responses and cognitive engagements that constitute genuine success in the specific, interior sense that the Stoics meant when they talked about the good life. The brain will strengthen whatever is practiced. The question is what is being practiced. And the answer to that question, examined honestly, reveals something that most people find genuinely uncomfortable when they first see it clearly. Most people are practicing the patterns they most want to change. Not deliberately. Not from any conscious intention to maintain the patterns that are producing the outcomes they do not want. But through the specific, automatic, entirely unconscious repetition of the habitual thought that arrives in response to the habitual stimulus and that is followed by the habitual response that produces the habitual outcome. Each repetition strengthens the pathway. Each strengthened pathway makes the next repetition more automatic. Each more automatic repetition makes the pathway stronger still. The cycle produces not change but the specific, increasingly efficient production of exactly what is being practiced. This is why the understanding of the need to change, without the specific practice of the changed pattern, produces nothing that lasts. Understanding that the old pattern is counterproductive does not weaken the old pattern's neural pathway. The pathway is strengthened by activation, not by understanding. And the understanding that the pathway should be different does not activate the new pathway that the different thought and the different response would produce. Only the practice of the new pattern activates the new pathway. Only the specific, repeated, genuinely effortful engagement with the different thought and the different response, in the real moment, in the actual stimulus situation, choosing the new pattern over the automatic old one, actually does what the rewiring requires to be done. This is what Marcus Aurelius was doing in his journals. He was not writing about what needed to change. He was practicing the changed thought. Writing the specific, new, deliberately chosen pattern as an act of engagement with it. Activating the new pathway through the genuine practice of the new thought, with the pen, with the specific effort of constructing the sentence that expressed the new pattern, with the daily return to the practice in the recognition that the new pattern required this kind of sustained, specific, genuinely repeated engagement to become what the old pattern already was. Automatic. What success actually means, the Stoic redefinition that changes everything. Before the rewiring can be directed, the destination must be precisely understood. And the destination that most people are directing their rewiring efforts toward is not the destination that the Stoics identified as success. The misdirection is one of the primary reasons that most rewiring efforts produce the specific, disappointing experience of working very hard towards something that, upon arrival, does not contain what it promised. The popular understanding of success locates it in external outcomes. The income, the status, the recognition, the specific external markers of achievement that the culture has established as the evidence of a successful life. This understanding is not entirely wrong. External outcomes have genuine value. The income that provides genuine security. The recognition that confirms genuine contribution. The status that reflects genuine excellence. These things are worth pursuing through appropriate means. But they are not the success that the Stoics identified as the genuine destination worth rewiring the mind toward. They are, in the Stoic framework, what the Stoics called preferred indifference. Things worth preferring, worth pursuing, genuinely better than their absence. But not the success that the genuinely good life is built from. Because they are located on the wrong side of the line, in the external, where they are subject to forces that are not under genuine control and that can be removed or diminished or fail to arrive regardless of the quality of the effort directed toward them. The Stoic success, the success that is worth rewiring the mind toward because it is the success that can be genuinely, durably, unconditionally achieved, is the specific, interior, character-grounded quality of a person who is living in genuine alignment with their genuine values. Who is engaging with the specific circumstances of their life with the specific qualities, wisdom, courage, justice, self-discipline, that the Stoics identified as the constituents of genuine human excellence. This success is not contingent on external outcomes. Not contingent on the market cooperating or the organization recognizing the contribution or the timing being favorable or any of the specific external factors that are genuinely relevant to external success but that are not under genuine control. It is contingent on one thing only. The quality of the choices made in the specific circumstances that are actually present. The specific, interior, entirely controllable quality of engagement with whatever the actual conditions of the actual life actually provide. This is the success that the rewired mind produces. Not the guaranteed external achievement. No amount of interior rewiring can guarantee the external's cooperation. The specific, interior, unconditionally available quality of someone who is engaging with their life from the patterns of thought and response that genuine excellence requires rather than from the patterns of thought and response that the habitual, unrewired mind automatically produces. The rewiring that the Stoics practiced was the specific, daily, genuinely effortful practice of building the neural pathways that constitute this interior success. The pathways of genuine equanimity in the presence of difficulty. Of genuine courage in the presence of fear. Of genuine wisdom in the presence of complexity. Of genuine self-discipline in the presence of the comfortable alternative. These pathways are built exactly the same way all neural pathways are built. Through the specific, repeated, genuinely practiced activation of the pattern. Through the daily engagement with the equanimous thought when the anxious thought is the automatic default. Through the daily choice of the courageous response when the avoidant response is the established pathway. Through the daily exercise of genuine wisdom when the convenient simplification is what the habitual mind produces automatically. This is the rewiring. And this is the success it produces. Not as an arrival. As the specific, daily, lived quality of a life that is being engaged with from the rewired patterns rather than the automatic ones. The specific patterns that must be rewired, the complete inventory. The patterns that constitute the unrewired mind are specific. They are not mysterious. They are not unique to any individual in any fundamental sense. They are the shared patterns of the human mind operating in its default state, without the specific, sustained, genuinely practiced engagement that the Stoic philosophical practices produce. The pattern of catastrophic interpretation. The unrewired mind meets difficulty with the specific, automatic pattern of catastrophic interpretation. The setback becomes evidence of permanent failure. The criticism becomes evidence of fundamental inadequacy. The uncertainty becomes evidence of inevitable disaster. The small daily frustration becomes the sign of a fundamentally broken situation. This pattern is the automatic product of the threat assessment system operating in the absence of the rewired corrective. It is not stupid or irrational. It is the mind doing what the mind does without the specific, practiced, genuinely developed corrective that the rewiring produces. The corrective is the specific, practiced, daily activation of the accurately calibrated interpretation. Not the forced positive interpretation that denies the genuine difficulty. The accurate one. The one that sees the setback as a specific obstacle to be addressed rather than as the permanent verdict on the life's direction. The one that receives the criticism as potentially useful information rather than as the definitive assessment of fundamental inadequacy. This accurate interpretation does not arrive automatically. It is produced by the specific, practiced, consistently maintained engagement with it. By the daily practice of catching the catastrophic interpretation in the moment of its automatic generation and choosing the accurate one instead. Not in the mind as an abstract correction but in the specific, active, genuinely engaged construction of the accurate interpretation as the response to the specific stimulus. Each time this is done, the accurate interpretation's pathway is activated. Strengthened. Made slightly more automatic. Until, over the months and years of consistent practice, the accurate interpretation begins to arrive with the specific, automatic quality that the catastrophic interpretation used to have. This is the rewiring. Not the single correction. The 1,000 specific corrections, made daily, that gradually shift the automatic default from the catastrophic to the accurate. The pattern of fear-governed avoidance. The unrewired mind meets the genuinely uncertain with the specific, automatic pattern of avoidance. The thing that might not work is not attempted. The conversation that might be uncomfortable is deferred. The risk that might produce the feared outcome is managed into non-existence. The direction that requires genuine commitment to genuine uncertainty is replaced with the comfortable familiar that requires neither. This pattern produces the specific, accumulating, entirely real cost of the deferred life. The things not done. The directions not taken. The genuine capacity not expressed because the fear of the outcome was more immediately powerful than the recognition that the expression of the genuine capacity was worth the uncertainty it involved. The rewiring that addresses this pattern is the specific, practiced, consistently maintained engagement with the courageous response. Not the elimination of the fear. The Stoics were clear that the physiological response to genuine uncertainty is part of the human equipment and cannot be simply eliminated through philosophical instruction. The specific, practiced, daily choice to act from genuine values in the presence of genuine fear rather than allowing the fear to govern the action. Each courageous choice, however small, however unglamorous, however far from the dramatic single act of courage that the popular imagination associates with the concept, activates the courageous response's pathway. Strengthens it. Makes it slightly more available as the automatic default in the next situation that genuine courage requires. Over time, the pattern of courageous response replaces the pattern of fear-governed avoidance as the default. Not completely. Not in all situations. But genuinely. In the specific, measurable, experientially real way that the rewired mind's default producing something different from the unrewired mind's default produces genuinely different outcomes in the specific life that the different default is shaping. The pattern of external validation seeking. The unrewired mind is organized around the external assessment of the self. The automatic question in every significant situation is some version of, what will this look like to the people whose assessment matters? The choices are shaped not primarily by genuine values but primarily by the management of the impression those choices will produce. This pattern produces the specific, internally experienced inauthenticity of the person who is continuously performing rather than genuinely expressing. The chronic disconnection between the genuine interior and the managed exterior. The specific, exhausting, creativity-killing requirement to continuously monitor and adjust the expression for the external's consumption rather than for the genuine interior's direction. The rewiring that addresses this pattern is the specific, practiced, consistently maintained engagement with internal standard rather than external assessment. The daily question not of how this will look but of whether this reflects the genuine values. Not of whether this will be recognized but of whether this represents genuine quality. Not of whether the room will confirm it but of whether the internal honest assessment confirms it. Each engagement with the internal standard over the external assessment activates and strengthens the internal standard's pathway. Gradually, genuinely, over the time the rewiring requires, the internal standard becomes the more available default. The question of how this will look is still present. But it is no longer the primary question. It has been displaced from the primary position by the specific, practiced, rewired engagement with the genuinely more authoritative question of what is genuinely true and genuinely right and genuinely aligned with the genuine values. The pattern of passive receipt. The unrewired mind treats the circumstances of the life as things that happen to it rather than as material that it engages with. The difficulty that arrives is an obstacle rather than an opportunity. The setback that occurs is a verdict rather than information. The gap between the current situation and the desired situation is a source of suffering rather than a map of the work. This pattern produces the specific, chronic, practically consequential condition of the person who is primarily a recipient of their circumstances rather than an active engager with them. Who is shaped by what arrives rather than shaping what arrives by the quality of their engagement with it. Who is the product of the life's conditions rather than the author of the response to those conditions. The Stoic philosophical tradition is built on the specific, foundational rejection of this pattern as the primary orientation. Epictetus built his entire philosophy from the specific, revolutionary, completely practical recognition that the orientation towards circumstances as things that happen to you is not the only available orientation. That the specific, active, values-governed orientation towards circumstances as material to be engaged with is not only available but is the specific orientation that produces genuine human excellence. The rewiring that addresses this passive receipt pattern is the specific, practiced, daily engagement with the active orientation. The daily practice of meeting what arrives with the genuinely constructive question, what can I do with this? Not, why did this happen to me? Not, how unfair is this? What can I do with this? Each engagement with this question activates and strengthens the active engagement's pathway. Each time the active orientation is practiced in the presence of the passive receipt pattern's automatic alternative, the active orientation's pathway grows slightly stronger. Until, over the time the rewiring requires, the active orientation begins to arrive with the automatic quality that the passive receipt used to have. This is perhaps the most fundamental and the most consequential rewiring available. Because the orientation toward life as material to be actively engaged with rather than conditions to be passively received is the specific, underlying, foundational pattern from which all the other rewired patterns most effectively operate. The pattern of undisciplined attention. The unrewired mind directs its attention wherever the strongest pull leads. To the most emotionally salient content. To the most immediately threatening or most urgently stimulating experience. To the ruminated past and the anticipated future rather than the available present. To the other people's lives being displayed on the available screens rather than to the genuine interior that the screen's content was specifically designed to prevent from becoming audible. This pattern produces the specific, chronic, practically catastrophic condition of the person whose most valuable resource, their attention, is perpetually captured by whatever demands it most effectively rather than directed by whatever the genuine life most genuinely requires. The rewiring that addresses this pattern is the specific, practiced, consistently maintained development of the attention's capacity for genuine direction. The daily practice of deliberately directing the attention toward what the genuine values require rather than toward what the automatic pull produces. The specific, effortful, genuine practice of being where you are rather than being wherever the strongest external pull has redirected you. Each deliberate direction of attention activates and strengthens the deliberate direction's pathway. Each time the attention is genuinely directed rather than automatically captured, the capacity for genuine direction grows slightly stronger. And this capacity, grown to genuine development through consistent practice, is among the most practically powerful resources available in the complete project of rewiring the mind for success. Because the person whose attention is genuinely directed, whose mind goes where they genuinely choose to send it rather than where the available stimulation captures it, has access to a quality of sustained, deep, genuinely productive engagement with the work and the relationships and the genuine priorities of the life that the person with the undirected attention cannot access regardless of their intelligence or their resources or their genuine desire to do the work that the life most requires. The complete Stoic rewiring practices, what they are and how they work. The Stoic philosophical tradition did not develop the concept of neuroplasticity. But it developed, through centuries of the most careful available observation of what actually produces genuine, lasting change in human character and behavior, the specific practices that the neuroscience now confirms as the most effective available mechanisms for genuine neural rewiring. These practices are not general philosophical recommendations. They are specific, daily, practically applicable exercises that the person who genuinely does them, not reads about, not intellectually engages with, genuinely does in the specific, effortful, regularly maintained way they require, will find produce the specific, measurable, genuinely transformative changes in the automatic patterns of thought and response that constitute the rewired mind. The morning philosophical installation. This is the foundational practice. The specific, daily, protected engagement with the philosophical understanding that the day's rewiring is built from. Not reading about the philosophy as an intellectual exercise. The specific practice of installing the philosophical understanding as the operating context from which the day's specific situations will be met. Dr. Reyes began this practice the morning after reading the Meditations until 5. He spent 30 minutes, before the professional demands, before the research and the teaching and the specific cognitive occupations of the working day, before any of the conditions that the day would provide had arrived, engaging specifically with the philosophical understanding that he wanted to be the default orientation when those conditions arrived. Not reading. Practicing. Constructing, in his own language, for his own specific situation, the specific thought that represented the rewired pattern's orientation toward the day's likely demands. Today I will meet what comes with the genuine curiosity of someone who understands that the conditions are the material and not the verdict. That difficulty is information and not evidence of failure. That the quality of my engagement is genuinely mine to govern regardless of what the quality of the outcomes I encounter is. Not this specific formulation. His formulation. The specific, personally meaningful, genuine construction of the rewired orientation in the language that his specific interior recognizes as genuinely his. This practice, maintained daily for weeks, produces something measurable and real. The orientation that was being practiced in the morning begins to arrive more automatically in the afternoon when the conditions that test it appear. Not because the morning practice is magic. Because the morning practice activates the new pathway. And each activation strengthens it. And the strengthened pathway becomes the slightly more available default. The pause and the practice. This is the in-the-moment practice. The specific, effortful, real-time interruption of the automatic pattern at the specific moment of its activation, the moment when the catastrophic interpretation is beginning to form, the moment when the fear-governed avoidance is organizing itself into the excuse that prevents the action, the moment when the external assessment is being checked before the genuine value is consulted, and the specific, deliberate, genuinely effortful engagement with the new pattern instead. The pause is the specific, brief, sometimes extremely brief creation of the space between the stimulus and the automatic response. The neuroscience is clear that this space, which is genuinely available in the fraction of a second between stimulus and response, is the specific location where the rewiring intervention can occur. And the practice is what fills the space. Not the suppression of the old pattern, suppression is not rewiring. The specific, active, genuinely engaged activation of the new pattern. The accurate interpretation constructed in the space where the catastrophic interpretation was forming. The courageous question asked in the space where the avoidance excuse was organizing itself. The internal standard consulted in the space where the external assessment was being checked. Each pause and practice is a repetition. And repetitions are what the rewiring is built from. Not dramatically. Each individual repetition produces an imperceptibly small strengthening of the new pathway. But the accumulation of specific, daily, consistently maintained repetitions produces the genuinely measurable, genuinely transformative changes in the automatic default that the rewired mind represents. This practice is the most immediately available and the most continuously applicable of all the rewiring practices. Because every day provides specific, real, genuinely testable situations in which the automatic pattern arrives and the pause and practice is available. And each time it is taken, the rewiring is occurring. The evening reconstruction and reinforcement. This practice is drawn directly from the Stoic tradition. Marcus Aurelius conducted it in his journals. Epictetus taught it to his students. Seneca described it with the specific, practically applicable detail of someone who had refined it across decades of personal practice. At the end of the day, the specific, honest, constructive review of where the automatic patterns governed and where the new patterns were practiced. Not for self-punishment. For the specific, targeted, practically useful identification of where the new pathways most need the next day's concentrated practice. And then, this is the specifically neuroscientific dimension of the practice that the Stoics applied without the vocabulary, the mental reconstruction of the situations where the automatic pattern governed, imagining the new pattern's response instead. Not as fantasy. As the specific, active, neural activation of the new pattern's pathway through the deliberate mental engagement with it. The neuroscience is clear that mental rehearsal of new patterns activates the same neural pathways as the physical enactment of those patterns. The person who vividly, specifically, actively imagines themselves responding to the day's difficult situation with the equanimous interpretation rather than the catastrophic one is activating the equanimous interpretation's pathway. Strengthening it. Contributing to the daily accumulation of strengthening that the rewiring requires. The evening reconstruction is therefore not merely a philosophical exercise. It is a genuine, neurologically real contribution to the rewiring that the daily, in-moment practice is building. The deliberate exposure to the rewired patterns demands. The Stoics practiced voluntary hardship. Not as asceticism but as the specific, deliberate expansion of the range of conditions across which the rewired patterns have been practiced. The understanding that the new pathway, built in comfortable conditions, is not yet available in the specific, high-pressure, genuinely demanding conditions that the most consequential moments of the life produce. The deliberate exposure practice is the specific, targeted engagement with the conditions that most test the new patterns. The voluntary entering of the situation that most reliably activates the old pattern. Not to be overwhelmed by it. To practice the new pattern in the specific conditions that the new pattern most needs to be practiced in if it is to be available when those conditions arrive without being voluntarily chosen. Dr. Reyes did this in the specific domain that his old patterns most reliably governed. He voluntarily entered conversations where being wrong was possible. He deliberately submitted work to processes where rejection was genuinely probable. He chose to express genuine opinions in rooms where disagreement was the likely response. Not to perform bravery. To practice the new pattern, the equanimous receipt of the outcome, the courageous expression of the genuine position, the accurate interpretation of the setback, in the specific conditions that the old pattern most reliably displaced it. Each voluntary exposure is a targeted practice of the new pathway in the conditions that the pathway most needs to be practiced in. Each one contributes to the availability of the new pattern in exactly the conditions that the rewiring is most specifically intended to address. The community of rewired practice. This is the practice that most people omit, and the omission is among the most consequential available in the complete project of genuine rewiring. The social environment is one of the most powerful shapers of the automatic patterns available. The people you spend the most time with are practicing specific patterns in your presence continuously. And the patterns that surround you are the patterns that the mirror neurons of your brain are continuously modeling and absorbing and gradually incorporating into your own automatic defaults. The person who is rewiring their mind toward the Stoic patterns while surrounded primarily by people who are practicing the unrewired patterns is swimming against a current that the practices can address but cannot fully overcome. Seeking out the company of people who are genuinely practicing the rewired patterns, who are genuinely engaging with equanimity and courage and the active orientation toward circumstances as material rather than verdict, is not selfishness. It is the specific, practical, neurologically real recognition that the environment's patterns are continuously shaping the automatic defaults of every person in it. And that the person who genuinely wants to rewire their mind for success will benefit enormously from the specific environment in which the rewired patterns are the norm rather than the exception. What the rewired mind produces, the genuine transformation across a life. Dr. Reyes continued the practices. Not perfectly. Not without the specific, daily, genuinely challenging experience of the automatic old patterns arriving with the full force of 11 years of unrewired strengthening while the new patterns were still in the early stages of their pathway development. But consistently. And the consistency produced what the neuroscience predicts and what the Stoic philosophical tradition documents and what the direct experience of the person who genuinely does the practices discovers. The automatic defaults changed. Gradually. Not dramatically in any single week. Measurably over months. The catastrophic interpretation began to arrive less automatically. The accurate interpretation began to arrive slightly sooner. The fear-governed avoidance began to be less automatically the first response, and the curious, courageous engagement with the uncertain began to be slightly more available. Not completely rewired in months. Genuinely different from the starting point. And genuinely moving in the specific direction that the daily practices were pointing. With the specific, experiential quality of someone who can feel the new pathways beginning to compete with the old ones. Who can feel the automatic default beginning to shift from what it was to what the practices are building. He published the paper that he had been avoiding for 3 years. Not because the fear was gone, the fear was still present. Because the courageous response had been practiced enough times that it was available alongside the fear rather than being displaced by it. Because the accurate interpretation of the risk was available alongside the catastrophic one rather than being automatically defeated by it. He had genuine conversations with his colleagues that he had been managing for years. Not because the discomfort of genuine conversation was gone, the discomfort was still present. Because the genuine engagement's pathway had been strengthened enough to compete with the avoidance pathway's automatic dominance. His relationship with his work changed. Not because the work changed. Because the orientation with which he engaged the work had changed. The active engagement rather than the passive receipt. The genuine curiosity rather than the performed confidence. The honest internal standard rather than the managed external impression. He was, in the specific, interior, genuinely measurable sense that the neuroscience describes and that the Stoic philosophical tradition had been pointing toward for 2,000 years, a different person from the person who had lain awake at 2 in the morning holding the question of why knowing had not produced changing. Not a completely different person. A person whose automatic defaults had been genuinely shifted toward the patterns that genuine success, the Stoic success, the interior success, the success that is available regardless of the external's cooperation, most fundamentally requires. The rewiring was real. It was the product of the specific, daily, genuinely effortful practices that the neuroscience describes as the mechanism and that the Stoic tradition had been embodying for 25 centuries. And it was not finished. The rewiring is never finished in the sense of being complete. It is an ongoing practice. The pathways require maintenance through continued activation. The new defaults, if the practices cease, will gradually lose their competitive advantage over the old ones. But the person who has built them to the level of genuine competition with the old defaults has something that the person who has only understood the theory of their importance does not have. The daily, practical, lived experience of a mind that is genuinely different from the one it started as. That meets the day's conditions with the rewired orientation rather than the automatic default. That engages with the specific, actual, genuinely present circumstances of the life with the patterns that genuine success most fundamentally requires. This is what the rewiring produces. Not immediately. Not without the daily effort that the daily practice requires. But genuinely. In the specific, cumulative, life-changing way that only the genuine daily practice of genuine neural rewiring can produce. The beginning of the rewiring, what tomorrow morning requires. Tomorrow morning, before the day's conditions arrive and before the automatic patterns have had their first opportunity of the day to strengthen themselves through the unreflective default engagement with whatever the morning provides, create the space. The 30 minutes. The specific, protected, genuinely engaged time that belongs to the practice rather than to the automatic operation of the unrewired mind. In that time, construct the specific philosophical orientation that you want to be the available alternative to the automatic default when the day's specific situations arrive. Not in general. Specifically. What is the day likely to bring? Where are the automatic patterns most likely to produce their familiar outputs? And what is the rewired response, the accurate interpretation, the courageous engagement, the internal standard, the active orientation, that you are specifically practicing today? Construct it. In your own words. With the genuine, personal, specifically yours engagement that makes the construction a genuine activation of the new pathway rather than a general aspiration toward being different in some vague future state. Then take it into the day. Into the specific, real, genuinely available situations that the day provides. And when the automatic pattern arrives, as it will, with the full force of whatever years of unrewired strengthening has built it, pause. Just the pause. The specific, brief, genuinely available interruption of the automatic sequence. And practice. The new pattern. In the real moment. With the real stimulus. In the genuinely available space between the stimulus and the response. One repetition. Then another. Then another. This is how the rewiring occurs. This is how Marcus Aurelius built what 2,000 years of subsequent humanity has found worth studying. This is how Dr. Reyes changed what 11 years of understanding could not change. This is how the mind that is genuinely different from the mind that is producing the current outcomes is actually, genuinely, biologically built. Not through understanding. Through the specific, effortful, consistently maintained practice of thinking and responding differently. One specific, real, genuinely practiced repetition at a time. Subscribe to Stoic Ascension right now. Turn on your notifications. Every single video on this channel is built for exactly this depth of genuine philosophical engagement combined with this quality of practically applicable instruction. The kind that bridges the specific gap between knowing what needs to change and actually doing the work that produces the change. What comes after this builds directly on everything you just heard. Every video goes deeper. Every video takes the practice further into the complete understanding of what genuine neural rewiring, philosophically grounded, specifically practiced, genuinely maintained, actually produces in the person willing to do it genuinely. Dr. Reyes lay awake at 2 in the morning with a question he had been thinking about for 11 years. He picked up the book his wife had left on the nightstand. He read until 5. He began the practice at 5:30. The understanding had been there for 11 years. The practice began that morning. And the rewiring began with the practice. Not with the understanding. Your understanding of what needs to change has been there long enough. The practice begins tomorrow morning. Before the day starts. Before the automatic patterns have their first opportunity. In the 30 minutes that belong to the rewiring. Begin there. Never lower yourself again. She apologized for taking up too much space in a room she had been invited to lead. Not metaphorically. Literally. Standing at the front of a conference room that had been arranged specifically for her presentation, with her name on the agenda and her materials on the screen and her specific expertise the entire reason the meeting existed, she apologized for having too many slides. For taking the group's time. For the specific inconvenience of her presence being required in a context that had been deliberately constructed around the requirement of her presence. The people in the room were politely confused. The apology did not fit the context in any observable way. Nobody had complained. Nobody had shown impatience. Nobody had communicated anything that could reasonably have been interpreted as the request for the apology she had just offered. She had simply lowered herself. Without being asked. Without any external pressure that required the lowering. From the specific, automatic, entirely unconscious reflex of a person who had been lowering herself for so long and in so many contexts that the lowering had become indistinguishable from the way she moved through the world. Her name was Celeste. She was 43 years old. And she was, without any qualification or performance or diminishment required, one of the most genuinely capable people in her professional field. The expertise she brought to that room was real. Comprehensively real. The kind of real that had been built through years of genuinely demanding work and genuinely serious engagement with genuinely complex problems. The kind of real that the people in that room were genuinely fortunate to have access to. She apologized for it. Not because she was humble. Genuine humility and the specific, chronic, entirely different condition of automatically lowering yourself are not the same thing, and the confusion between them is one of the most consequential available. Genuine humility is the accurate assessment of your genuine position, neither inflated nor diminished, that allows genuine learning and genuine connection. What Celeste was doing was not genuine humility. It was self-erasure. The specific, practiced, completely automatic diminishment of herself in every context that might otherwise require or reveal the full weight of what she actually was. She had been doing this since she was 7 years old. Since the specific, early, entirely formative experience of being in a household where the full expression of her genuine self had not been welcome. Where being too much, too loud, too smart, too present, too demanding of the specific recognition that her genuine self genuinely deserved, had produced responses from the people whose assessments had mattered most that had taught her, with the specific efficiency of early learning, that the lowering was safer than the full expression. She had learned. Children learn what they are taught. And what she had been taught was the specific, consequential, life-shaping lesson that her genuine self, the full, undiminished, genuinely present version of who she actually was too much for the rooms she inhabited. That the appropriate strategy was the preemptive diminishment. The voluntary lowering. The specific, self-applied reduction that prevented the external from requiring a reduction that would be more costly because it would come from outside rather than from within. She had been applying this strategy for 36 years. It had worked. In the specific, devastating sense that it had successfully prevented the specific, external, explicit rejection that the full expression would have risked. She had not been rejected. She had been accommodated. Welcomed. Found pleasant and professional and appropriately sized for the rooms she moved through. And she had never, in 36 years of successful self-lowering, been in a room that knew what had been left outside of it. She found the Stoics through her therapist. Not as a therapeutic intervention, the therapist was careful to offer it as a suggestion rather than a prescription. As a philosophical encounter. With the specific instruction to read not as someone looking for comfort but as someone looking for the philosophical framework that makes genuine self-respect, not the performed confidence of self-help culture but the genuine, philosophically grounded, unconditionally available sense of the self's genuine worth, genuinely possible. She read Epictetus first. Who had every external reason to lower himself and who had refused at the level that actually mattered, the interior level, the level of genuine self-regard, the level of the specific, philosophical recognition that his worth was not located in his external circumstances and therefore could not be diminished by them. She read Marcus Aurelius next. Who had written, in the privacy of his journals, about the continuous, demanding, internally generated work of maintaining genuine self-respect in conditions that continuously offered the opportunity to surrender it to the expectations of the people around him. Who had understood that the lowering was always available and always the easier choice and that the not lowering required the specific, daily, genuinely difficult practice of the person who has decided that the interior is where the genuine worth lies and that nothing external has the authority to revise the genuine interior's assessment. She read Seneca last. Who had written about dignity with the specific urgency of someone who understood that the person who lowers themselves for external approval has exchanged the only thing genuinely worth having for something that was never worth having. She sat with these books for 3 weeks. And then she went back to the conference room. For a different meeting. With different people. With the same expertise and the same materials and the same genuine, undeniable, comprehensively real capability that had been in the room the first time. She did not apologize for any of it. Not because she had performed confidence she did not feel. Because she had done the specific, interior, philosophically grounded work of beginning to locate her sense of genuine worth in the place where Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius and Seneca had been pointing with the consistency of 2,000 years of philosophical urgency. Inside. Where the apology had never been required. And where the genuine self, fully present and fully expressed, had always been enough. This is what we are exploring today. Completely. Without the comfortable shortcuts that most conversations about self-respect offer in place of the genuine philosophical work that genuine self-respect actually requires. This is Stoic Ascension. Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on your notifications because every single video here is built for exactly this depth and exactly this quality of genuine philosophical engagement. The kind that addresses not the surface behavior but the specific, foundational, philosophical understanding that makes the behavior genuinely possible to change. What comes after this builds directly on everything you are about to hear. Do not miss what is coming. What lowering yourself actually is, the precise diagnosis. Lowering yourself is not modesty. The confusion between these two things is one of the most consistently damaging available because it allows the person who is chronically lowering themselves to frame the lowering as a virtue and therefore to feel philosophically justified in continuing it. Modesty is the accurate assessment of your genuine position. The specific, honest, neither inflated nor deflated account of what you actually are and what you actually contribute that allows genuine engagement with other people from a foundation of genuine truth. Modesty says, here is what I actually bring, accurately assessed, without inflation or diminishment. Lowering yourself is something structurally different. It is the specific, systematic, habitual application of diminishment to the accurate assessment. The voluntary reduction of what is genuinely there to something smaller than what is actually present. Not from honest assessment. From the specific, deeply embedded belief that the full and accurate expression of what is genuinely there is too much for the context. That the preemptive reduction is safer than the full expression. That the lowering protects against something that the full presence risks. This belief is always, at its root, a fear. Specifically, the fear of the specific response that the full expression might produce. The rejection, the diminishment, the specific experience of being too much that the early environments that taught the lowering produced when the full expression was attempted. The lowering is the learned solution to this fear. And learned solutions to early fears are extraordinarily durable. They persist long past the conditions that produced them. Long past the environments that required them. Long past the relationships and the contexts in which the preemptive diminishment genuinely served any protective function. They persist because they were learned early. Because early learning is deep learning. Because the specific, interior architecture of how to be in the world that is assembled in the early years is the architecture from which everything subsequent is built. And changing architecture that is load-bearing is genuinely difficult. Not impossible. Genuinely difficult. The Stoics understood this with the specific precision of people who had examined human character development with the most rigorous available attention. They understood that the patterns most deeply embedded in the character were the ones most difficult to address and the ones most consequential to address because their persistence had the most comprehensive effect on the quality of the life they shaped. And they built their philosophical practices around the specific recognition that genuine character development, genuine, permanent, structurally significant change in the fundamental patterns of how a person engages with the world, was possible. Not quick. Not comfortable. Not the product of a single insight or a single decision. The product of the specific, daily, consistently maintained philosophical practice that builds, gradually and genuinely, the specific interior architecture that the person who was taught to lower themselves was not taught and that the adult must therefore build themselves from the inside out. The specific forms of lowering, recognizing the pattern in your own life. The lowering does not always look like Celeste's apology for being in the room she was invited to lead. It takes many forms. All of them have the same structure, the voluntary, preemptive, self-applied reduction of what is genuinely there to something smaller than what is actually present, but the specific expression varies considerably with the specific person and the specific context. The lowering of your genuine opinions. This is the most pervasive form of the lowering and the one that most people engage in most consistently without recognizing it as a form of self-diminishment. The specific, habitual modification of your genuine opinion before you express it to bring it into alignment with what you assess the room wants to hear. Not the appropriate consideration of context and timing and relationship that genuine social intelligence requires. The specific, chronic, automatic process of checking the genuine opinion against the room's expected preference and adjusting the expression accordingly. The person who does this consistently has, over time, lost access to their own genuine opinions in the most practical sense. Not because the opinions are not there. Because the process of checking and adjusting has become so automatic and so rapid that the genuine opinion and the adjusted expression have become indistinguishable. The person who has been modifying their opinions for external consumption for long enough begins to believe that the modified version is the genuine one. This is the specific, insidious, deeply consequential cost of the lowering in the domain of genuine opinion. Not just the specific cost of the unexpressed opinion in the specific context. The broader cost of the gradual erosion of access to the genuine interior that the continuous modification produces. The lowering of your genuine standards. The specific, habitual acceptance of less than what your genuine assessment of a situation tells you is genuinely appropriate. Not the appropriate flexibility of someone who can adjust standards to context with the genuine wisdom that context genuinely requires. The specific, chronic pattern of accepting less because accepting more would require a confrontation that the lowering's training specifically avoids. The work that is accepted as adequate when the honest assessment says it is not. The treatment that is tolerated when the honest assessment of what you deserve says it should not be tolerated. The specific, ongoing, accumulating acceptance of less than what genuine self-respect would require as the standard that this relationship, this environment, this situation should meet. The lowering of genuine standards has a specific, visible, entirely measurable cost. The environments organized around the acceptance of what the genuine assessment says is insufficient produce, over time, the specific, increasingly difficult to reverse condition of the person who has forgotten what the genuine standard actually feels like. Who has normalized the insufficient so thoroughly that the genuinely appropriate has begun to feel like an unreasonable expectation. The lowering of your genuine needs. The specific, habitual minimization of what you genuinely need before you express it. Not the appropriate calibration of need to context and relationship and the genuine availability of what is needed. The specific, preemptive reduction of the need itself, before any request has been made, before any response has been given, to something smaller than what the genuine honest assessment of what you actually need would produce. I don't need much. I'm fine with whatever. It doesn't matter. Don't worry about me. These expressions, offered reflexively and automatically in contexts where what you actually need is specific and significant and genuinely matters, are the lowering in the domain of need. They protect against the specific, feared outcome of expressing a genuine need and having it denied or minimized or met with the response that trained the minimizing in the first place. And they cost the specific, genuine, practically consequential thing that genuine needs, genuinely unmet because genuinely unexpressed, always cost. The specific quality of the relationship and the environment that meeting genuine needs would have produced. The specific, interior, entirely real sense of genuine mattering that the genuine expression and the genuine meeting of genuine needs provides. The lowering of your genuine worth. The most foundational and the most consequential form of the lowering. The specific, habitual assessment of your own value, your contribution, your expertise, your presence, your genuine significance to the people and the purposes you care most about, at a level below what the honest, accurate, genuinely fair assessment would produce. Not the appropriate recognition that others have value too. Not the genuine humility that acknowledges the contributions of others alongside your own. The specific, chronic, self-applied reduction of your genuine assessment of your own worth that produces the specific conditions in which the apology for being in the room you were invited to lead feels natural rather than inappropriate. Celeste's assessment of her own worth had been calibrated, over 36 years of self-lowering, to a level considerably below what the honest, accurate, fair assessment would produce. Not because the honest assessment was unavailable to her, she was intelligent enough and self-aware enough to access it with effort. Because the automatic assessment, the one that operated without effort, in real time, in the specific moments where worth assessments are made, had been trained to the lower level. Had been calibrated, by the 36 years of application, to produce the lower number as the default. The recalibration of this automatic assessment is the specific, central, most consequential work available in the project of never lowering yourself again. And it is the work that the Stoic philosophical practices are most precisely designed to support. Why you lower yourself, the honest account of what it is actually protecting. The lowering is always protecting something. This is the most important thing to understand about it because the understanding is what makes the specific, targeted address of it possible. It is not random. It is not a habit without a function. It has a specific, interior function that it performs with genuine effectiveness. And understanding what that function is, what the lowering is protecting you from, what the full expression without the lowering risks, is the prerequisite for the specific, philosophical, genuinely effective engagement with why the protection is no longer necessary. The lowering protects against the specific experience of being the full version of yourself and having that full version rejected. Diminished. Found to be too much. Responded to with the specific communication that the full version is not welcome in this context and that a reduced version would be preferred. This experience, of bringing the genuine self fully into a context and having the context reject the genuine self rather than the reduced version, is more painful than the rejection of the reduced version. Because the rejection of the reduced version can be deflected. Can be received as the rejection of the performance rather than of the genuine self. Can be survived with the genuine self intact. The rejection of the full version cannot be deflected. It lands directly on the genuine self. On the thing that is most genuinely and most irreducibly yours. And the specific, interior experience of that landing, of having what is most genuinely you met with the communication that it is insufficient or excessive or unwelcome, is the experience that the lowering was designed to prevent. The Stoics would engage with this protective function with the specific, compassionate, philosophically rigorous approach that genuine character work requires. They would acknowledge the function. They would not dismiss it as irrational or unfounded. The early experiences that taught the lowering were real. The rejection that the lowering was trained to prevent was real. The specific interior wound that the lowering developed in response to is real. And then they would ask the question that the Stoic philosophical tradition is specifically designed to enable: is this protection still necessary? Are the current conditions the same as the conditions that required the protection in the first place? And is the cost of continuing the protection in the current conditions, where the risks are different and the genuine self has developed the resources that the early self did not have, actually lower than the cost of genuinely engaging with the current conditions as they actually are rather than as the early conditions were? This question, asked honestly and engaged with genuinely, almost always reveals that the protection is no longer necessary in the specific way it was necessary when it was developed. That the current rooms are not the early rooms. That the current relationships are not the early relationships. That the current self has genuine resources, the philosophical development, the genuine wisdom, the specific interior architecture that the years have built, that the early self did not have, and that make the rejection of the full self genuinely survivable in a way that the early self's rejection was not genuinely survivable with the resources available at the time. The lowering was necessary then. It is not necessary now. And the recognition of this, genuinely, philosophically, with the honest examination of what is actually present in the current conditions rather than what the early training is projecting onto them, is the beginning of the genuine work of never lowering yourself again. The Stoic philosophical foundation of genuine self-respect, what it actually is and where it actually lives. Genuine self-respect, in the Stoic understanding, is not confidence in the popular sense. Not the performed self-assurance of someone who presents well and appears certain. Not the specific, culturally recognizable display of not caring what others think that self-help culture sometimes presents as the goal. It is something considerably more precise and considerably more genuinely valuable than any of these things. Genuine self-respect, in the Stoic framework, is the specific, daily, honestly maintained recognition that your worth is located in your character. In the quality of your choices. In the integrity of your engagement with your genuine values. In the specific, genuine, unconditionally available sense of being genuinely okay that comes not from the external's assessment of you but from the internal's honest assessment of whether you are living in alignment with what you genuinely hold. This worth cannot be taken. Cannot be reduced by the room's failure to acknowledge it. Cannot be augmented by the room's enthusiastic confirmation of it. Cannot be lowered by anything external because it is not located in anything external. It lives precisely where the lowering has been reaching, in the interior, and it has always been there. The lowering has not been protecting it. The lowering has been covering it. Has been substituting the external's reduced assessment of what the lowering has offered for presentation for the internal's genuine assessment of what is actually there. Epictetus wrote about this from inside conditions that tested it with complete severity. He had nothing by which the external world assesses worth. No freedom. No property. No recognized status. No professional position. No institutional belonging. Nothing that the cultural assessment of worth uses as its currency. And he had, more completely than most people who possess everything the cultural assessment values, genuine self-respect. Because he had located it precisely. In the only place it was genuinely available. In his own judgment, his own intention, his own chosen response to the conditions of his life. In the specific, internal, unconditionally his quality of his engagement with the truth of what he was. This is not a quality that required his freedom to develop. Required his property to access. Required the empire's recognition to be real. It was available inside the specific conditions of his captivity because it was located inside rather than in the conditions. And it is available inside the specific conditions of your life. Right now. Regardless of what the conditions are. Regardless of what the external has been assessing. Regardless of how long the lowering has been the established pattern. It is available because it was always there. Beneath the lowering. Covered by the performance of the reduced version. Present in the interior that the reduction was never genuinely required to protect. The Stoic philosophical practices are specifically designed to make this available. Not to install it, it is already there. To make it accessible. To build the specific, interior pathway between the genuine worth that has always been present and the consciousness that has been so thoroughly organized around the external assessment that it has forgotten the internal one was always there and always more authoritative. The specific practices of never lowering yourself again, what they require and what they build. Never lowering yourself again is not a single decision. It is the daily, ongoing, specifically maintained practice of choosing the full expression over the lowered one in the specific moments where both are available and where the lowering is more immediately comfortable because it is the more familiar and the more practiced. The practice of the uncorrected genuine opinion. Every day provides the specific opportunity of the uncorrected genuine opinion. The moment where the genuine assessment of the situation is present and the automatic process of checking and adjusting it for external consumption has not yet occurred and the specific choice of expressing the genuine version rather than the adjusted version is available. Practice taking this opportunity. Express the genuine opinion before the correction. Not carelessly, genuine opinions deserve genuine consideration before they are expressed. With care. With the honest assessment of whether what you genuinely think is what you genuinely think rather than what the adjusted version has substituted for it. And then express the genuine version. Not all genuine opinions require expression in all contexts. This is not the counsel of reflexive honesty that produces unnecessary friction in genuinely unnecessary situations. It is the specific, daily, targeted practice of choosing the genuine expression over the lowered one in the specific contexts where the genuine expression genuinely matters and where the lowering has been the automatic default. Notice what happens when you do this. Notice the specific interior sensation of the expressed genuine opinion that has not been corrected. The specific quality of having been in a room as the genuine version of yourself rather than the preemptively reduced version. Whether or not the response is what the full expression deserves, the specific interior quality of the full expression is different. Is more genuinely alive. Is more genuinely yours. The practice of the stated genuine standard. When what is being offered does not meet the genuine standard, in the work, in the relationship, in the specific treatment you receive from the people and the institutions that your genuine self genuinely deserves better from, practice stating the genuine standard rather than accepting the insufficient with the performed contentment that the lowering produces. Not aggressively. Not with the specific, overcompensating force of someone who has been lowering themselves and who is now swinging to the opposite extreme. With the specific, calm, genuinely grounded expression of someone who knows what the genuine standard is and who states it from the interior resource of genuine self-respect rather than from the reactive resource of accumulated resentment. This is genuinely difficult in the early stages. The lowering has been so consistent for so long that the statement of the genuine standard initially feels like aggression. Like the specific, unacceptable, too muchness that the lowering was designed to prevent. Like being the person who demands too much and takes up too much space and expects more than the room is comfortable providing. It is not those things. It is the specific, legitimate, genuinely appropriate expression of the genuine standard that your genuine worth genuinely merits. And the consistency of its expression, the daily, regularly maintained practice of stating the genuine standard rather than accepting the insufficient, gradually recalibrates the interior's assessment of what is genuinely appropriate to expect. Which gradually changes what the automatic assessment produces. Gradually moves the default from the lowered standard to the genuine one. Not immediately. Gradually. Through the specific, accumulating, interior recalibration that the consistent practice of the genuine standard produces. The practice of the uncollapsed presence. In every room you inhabit, there is the specific, available, daily practice of being fully present rather than partially present. Of occupying the full physical and psychological space that your genuine presence genuinely deserves rather than the preemptively reduced space that the lowering has been negotiating. This is a physical practice as much as a philosophical one. The posture that occupies the full space rather than the contracted space of someone who is apologizing for their presence by the way they hold their body. The voice that speaks from the full register of its genuine authority rather than the reduced register of the preemptively quieted person. The eye contact that holds for the full duration of genuine engagement rather than breaking early to signal the non-threatening quality of the reduced presence. And it is a psychological practice. The meeting contribution that is offered from the full weight of the genuine expertise rather than from the preemptively qualified, excessively hedged, apologetically framed version that the lowering has been producing. The perspective shared without the prefatory diminishment that the lowering deploys to protect against the response by reducing the expression before the response can reduce it. Practice the uncollapsed presence. Daily. In the specific, small, immediately available ways that the full presence can be expressed without drama and without the performative overcorrection that swings from the lowering to the opposite extreme rather than arriving at the genuine middle of the accurate and full self-expression. The practice of the internalized standard of genuine worth. This is the most foundational and the most important practice available for never lowering yourself again. The specific, daily, honestly maintained practice of assessing your own worth from an internal standard rather than from the external assessment. Not, what does this room think of my contribution? But, does my contribution reflect my genuine capability and my genuine care for what I am contributing to? Not, is this person treating me as I deserve to be treated? But, am I presenting myself to this person in the way that accurately communicates what I genuinely deserve to receive? Not, has the external confirmed that I am enough? But, have my choices today reflected the person whose internal standard I am genuinely working toward? These questions, asked honestly and daily, from the genuine interior rather than from the external assessment, gradually produce the specific recalibration of the default assessment that the lowering has been generating. The automatic assessment that the lowering produces, the preemptive reduction, the voluntary diminishment, the specific self-applied lowering that has been the operating system, begins to be replaced, gradually and genuinely, by a different automatic assessment. The assessment that comes from the genuine interior, from the honest engagement with the genuine character and the genuine values and the genuine worth that is actually present. The assessment that does not require the external's confirmation because it draws on a source of confirmation that is more authoritative and more durable than anything the external has ever been able to provide. This is the long-term practice. The one that takes months and years of consistent application to produce the genuine, structural change in the default assessment. But it is the practice that produces the change that actually matters. Not the changed behavior without the changed foundation, the surface adjustment that produces the appearance of not lowering yourself without the genuine interior work that makes the not lowering genuinely available as a permanent condition rather than a performed stance. The genuine interior work. The specific, daily, patiently maintained practice of locating your sense of genuine worth in the only place where genuine worth genuinely lives. And then defending that location against everything the external offers as an alternative. Against the room that does not acknowledge you. Against the relationship that does not value you. Against the specific, familiar, deeply embedded pull of the lowering that will continue to present itself as the safer option long after the philosophical work has begun to reveal it as the more expensive one. The practice of the genuine requirement. In every significant relationship and every significant environment, there are specific, genuine requirements that your genuine self genuinely needs in order to be fully present rather than partially present. Specific conditions of genuine respect, genuine recognition, genuine reciprocity that the full expression of who you are genuinely requires. Practice identifying these requirements. Specifically. Honestly. Without the preemptive reduction of what you genuinely need to something smaller than what the honest assessment produces. And then, this is the practice, expressing them. Not as ultimatums. Not with the specific, reactive force of someone who has been lowering themselves and who is now demanding compensation for the lowering. With the specific, calm, genuinely grounded expression of someone who knows what they genuinely need and who communicates it from the interior resource of genuine self-respect. Some of these requirements will be met. Some will not. The meeting or the not meeting is not the primary thing. The primary thing is the practice of the genuine expression. Of presenting the genuine requirement rather than the preemptively reduced version. Of being in the relationship or the environment as the full version of yourself rather than the version that has lowered its requirements to fit the room's comfort. The relationships and the environments that meet the genuine requirements are the relationships and environments your genuine self genuinely belongs in. The ones that do not, consistently, over genuine time, with genuine honesty about what the pattern reveals, are information. The specific, honest, genuinely useful information about where the full version of your genuine self is genuinely welcome and where the room requires the reduced version for reasons that have nothing to do with your genuine worth. What never lowering yourself again produces, the genuine transformation. Celeste stopped apologizing. Not immediately. Not completely. Not without the specific, ongoing, daily renewed practice of the person who is replacing a 36-year operating system with a different one and who therefore encounters the old system's outputs continuously and must continuously choose the new practice over the automatic default. But genuinely. Over the months after reading the Stoics and beginning the specific, interior, philosophically grounded work of the practices we have described, she stopped apologizing for being in the rooms she was invited to lead. Stopped preemptively diminishing the expertise that the room had gathered to access. Stopped offering the reduced version of the genuine self when the full version was what the context actually deserved and what she actually was. The rooms responded. Not dramatically. In the specific, quiet, entirely genuine way that rooms respond when the person presenting to them is the full version rather than the reduced one. With the quality of genuine reception that the full expression produces and that the preemptive reduction, however skilled, had never quite generated. Because the full version communicates something the reduced version cannot communicate. The specific, implicit, entirely nonverbal communication of the person who is fully present. Who occupies the room as themselves. Who offers what they have to offer without the preemptive reduction that signals the specific, interior assessment that the full version is too much. The full version communicates, I am here. Actually here. As myself. What I am offering is what I actually am, accurately expressed, without the reduction that would make it more comfortable or more palatable or smaller than what it actually is. This communication produces a quality of genuine engagement that the reduced version never could. The room that receives the full expression must respond to the full thing. Cannot manage the gap between what was presented and what is actually there because there is no gap. The full thing and the presentation are the same thing. This is what never lowering yourself again produces. Not immediately. Not without the daily practice and the daily difficulty of choosing the full expression over the automatic default. But genuinely. Over the time that the genuine interior work genuinely requires. The life lived as the full version of yourself. In the rooms that deserve the full version. With the people who are willing and able to receive the full version. Doing the work that the full version's genuine capacity makes possible. And the specific, interior, completely genuine quality of someone who has stopped asking the external to confirm what the internal has always known. Who has relocated the authority for their own worth from the room's assessment to the interior's honest accounting. And who has discovered, in this relocation, something that 36 years of successful self-lowering had consistently prevented from being discovered. That the full version was not too much. It was exactly enough. It had always been exactly enough. The only thing that was too much was the lowering. Subscribe to Stoic Ascension right now. Turn on your notifications. Every single video on this channel is built for exactly this depth of genuine philosophical engagement and this quality of honest, practically applicable instruction. The kind that addresses not just the surface behavior but the specific, foundational, philosophical architecture that makes the genuine change genuinely possible. What comes after this builds directly on everything you just heard. Every video goes deeper. Every video takes the practice further into the complete understanding of what genuine self-respect, philosophically grounded, internally located, unconditionally available, actually requires and what it actually produces in the person willing to do the work. Celeste apologized for being in the room she was invited to lead. She read the Stoics. She stopped. Not because she performed the not apologizing. Because she began the specific, interior, daily practiced work of locating her worth in the only place it was ever genuinely available. Inside. Where it had always been. Exactly enough. Your worth is there too. Inside. Exactly enough. It has always been exactly enough. Stop lowering it. Never lower yourself again. Nobody is coming, do it alone. She waited for someone to notice for 7 years. Not passively. She was not the kind of person who sits in silence hoping to be discovered. She was competent, visible, professionally active, socially present. She attended the meetings. She submitted the work. She expressed, in the appropriate professional contexts and with the appropriate professional vocabulary, the specific ambitions and aspirations that the professional environment considered legitimate to express. She waited for the recognition that the competence and the visibility and the professional activity were supposed to generate. The mentor who would see what she was capable of and choose to champion it. The opportunity that would arrive once the right person noticed the right thing at the right moment. The specific convergence of external acknowledgement and external support and external validation that would finally make the next thing possible in the way that the current thing, however genuinely accomplished, somehow had not yet made it possible. Her name was Amara. She was 41 years old. She had spent 7 years in an organization that she was, by every honest assessment she was capable of making, more capable than. Where her contributions were genuine and acknowledged in the specific, mild, unmemorable way that genuine contributions in large organizations are acknowledged when they do not threaten anyone and do not challenge anything and do not require anyone to do the specific, costly, relationship-risking work of genuinely championing someone whose advancement would require displacing someone else. She had been waiting for someone to do that work. To see her clearly enough and care enough and have enough influence and be willing to spend enough political capital to bring her where her capacity genuinely belonged. Nobody came. Not because she was in an organization of bad people. The people were not bad. Some of them were genuinely good. Some of them had genuine regard for her and genuine appreciation for her contributions. Some of them had, at specific moments in the 7 years, said specific things that had suggested the championship might be coming, the opportunity might be arriving, the specific convergence of external acknowledgement and support that she had been waiting for might finally be assembling itself. None of them came through. Not from malice. From the specific, entirely ordinary, completely human pattern of people who are primarily occupied with their own advancement and their own challenges and their own specific version of exactly the waiting that Amara was doing, waiting for someone to see them and champion them and bring them where their own capacity belonged, to also do the specific, costly, attention-consuming work of genuinely advancing someone else. She understood this one morning, sitting at her desk before anyone else had arrived, with the specific, unmanageable clarity of a recognition that has been approaching for a long time and that has finally arrived in a form that cannot be accommodated by any further version of the story that made the waiting feel like reasonable strategy. Nobody was coming. Not as a dramatic revelation. As the specific, quiet, completely honest assessment of 7 years of genuine evidence. The pattern was not ambiguous. The evidence was not incomplete. The waiting had produced exactly what waiting produces when what is being waited for is entirely in the hands of other people who have their own priorities and their own limitations and their own entirely reasonable reasons for not being the person who shows up. She sat with this for a long time. Not with self-pity, she was not a person given to self-pity. With the specific, practical, serious quality of attention that someone who has just recognized a fundamental strategic error brings to the question of what to do next. She had been organized around the wrong model. Had been operating in the specific, comfortable, culturally reinforced paradigm that positions external acknowledgement as the prerequisite for genuine advancement. That treats other people's recognition of your capacity as the necessary condition for your capacity to be expressed at its full level. That makes the gap between what you are capable of and what you are currently doing a problem to be solved by the right person noticing rather than by the person with the capacity choosing to express it regardless of whether the right person has noticed. She had been waiting to be given permission. Nobody was coming to give it. That morning, she stopped waiting. Not dramatically. She did not resign. She did not send an email announcing a new philosophy. She made a single, internal, completely private decision that produced no immediate external change and that nonetheless changed everything about how the subsequent years unfolded. She decided that the advancement was hers to produce. That the opportunity was hers to create. That the capacity she had been waiting to have acknowledged was going to be expressed regardless of whether the acknowledgement preceded or followed the expression. That the next thing was not going to happen because the right person noticed. It was going to happen because she built it. She read the Stoics that weekend. Not for the first time, she had encountered them in university and had found them interesting in the way that intelligent people in comfortable enough situations find philosophically demanding ideas interesting before life makes the demands concrete and personal. This time was different. This time she was reading Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius and Seneca with the specific, urgent, entirely practical attention of someone who has just recognized that the model they have been operating under for 7 years was wrong and who needs, with the specific urgency of someone who has spent 7 years on a problem that requires a different approach, to understand what the right model actually is. What she found was not a new strategy for getting other people to recognize and champion her. What she found was something considerably more fundamental and considerably more transformative. The recognition that the entire frame of needing other people to come, to notice, to champion, to validate, to authorize, was itself the problem. Not the specific failure of specific people to show up. The specific, philosophically consequential mistake of treating external authorization as the prerequisite for internal expression. Epictetus, who had operated without any external authorization whatsoever, who had been a slave with no rights and no recognized capacity and no one whose job it was to notice or champion or advance him, had built one of the most significant philosophical contributions in human history. Not because someone came. Because he understood, at the most fundamental level available, that nobody was coming. And that the understanding of this was not a reason for despair but the specific, liberating, completely transformative recognition that everything genuinely worth building had always been available to be built by the person who possessed the capacity and was willing to express it without waiting for permission. She put the book down. She picked up a notepad. She started writing the plan that nobody was going to give her. This is what we are exploring today. Completely. With the philosophical depth and the practical honesty and the genuine urgency that 7 years of waiting, 7 years that most people extend to 30 or 40, makes clear it deserves. This is Stoic Ascension. Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on your notifications because every single video here is built for exactly this depth and this quality of honest philosophical engagement. The kind that names the specific comfortable mistake that most people are making and that provides the specific, practically applicable understanding of what the alternative actually requires. What comes after this builds directly on everything you are about to hear. Do not miss what is coming. Why nobody is coming, the honest philosophical account. This is not pessimism. It is the most accurate available description of the specific structure of reality that the waiting person has been successfully protected from seeing clearly by the story that makes the waiting feel like reasonable strategy. Nobody is coming because everyone else is in exactly the situation you are in. Every person you are waiting to notice you, to champion you, to create the opportunity that your capacity deserves, every single one of them is primarily occupied with their own version of exactly this. With their own advancement and their own challenges and their own waiting for the specific person who will finally see them clearly enough to bring them where they believe they belong. This is not cynicism. This is the honest description of how human attention works. Human attention is primarily self-directed. Not from selfishness in the moral sense, from the specific, entirely natural prioritization that everyone makes when there is more to attend to than there is attention available. You attend first to your own situation, your own development, your own advancement, your own challenges. And then, with what is left, you attend to others. Which means that the amount of attention genuinely available for the specific, effortful, relationship-risking, political capital spending work of genuinely advancing someone else is, in most people's lives, genuinely small. Not because they are bad people. Because they are human people with human limitations on the attention and the energy and the willingness to incur costs in service of someone else's advancement. The Stoics understood this with extraordinary precision. Epictetus taught about the dichotomy of control, the specific philosophical recognition that what is up to you and what is not up to you are fundamentally different categories and must be treated as such. And the recognition that other people's choices about whether to champion you, notice you, create opportunities for you, advance you, all of this is firmly and completely in the category of what is not up to you. You cannot control whether the right person notices. You cannot control whether the mentor shows up. You cannot control whether the organization rewards the capacity it has access to. You cannot control whether the world arranges itself in the specific way that your advancement requires if your advancement is organized around external action rather than internal expression. You can control none of this. And the person who has organized their advancement around things they cannot control has organized themselves into a specific kind of permanent dependency that the Stoics identified as one of the most consequential available philosophical errors. Not because other people's support has no value. It has genuine value. Mentorship is real and important. Recognition is real and motivating. Genuine championship from someone with influence is a genuine accelerant for capacity that deserves acceleration. But it is an accelerant, not the engine. The engine is the person who has the capacity and who has decided to express it regardless of whether the accelerant has arrived. Who has understood that the waiting for the accelerant to appear before starting the engine is the specific mistake that makes the acceleration indefinitely unavailable. Marcus Aurelius understood this from the position of someone who had everything that external support could provide and who nonetheless returned, daily, to the recognition that the governance of his own life and the expression of his own capacity were his responsibility and not anyone else's. Even at the summit of human power, the work was his. The choices were his. The character being built or not built was his. If the most externally supported person in the ancient world understood that nobody was coming to do his work for him, that the work was always and only his to do, the person waiting for someone to come create their opportunity has perhaps misunderstood something fundamental about whose responsibility the expression of their capacity actually is. The specific ways the waiting manifests, naming the pattern precisely. The waiting that Amara engaged in for 7 years is not a single, identifiable behavior. It is a pattern. A cluster of specific, related, mutually reinforcing behaviors and beliefs that organize themselves around the fundamental premise that external authorization or external action or external acknowledgement is the prerequisite for internal expression. Naming the specific manifestations of this pattern is essential for genuinely identifying it in your own life. Because the waiting does not announce itself as waiting. It announces itself as patience, as strategic positioning, as professional wisdom, as the appropriate reading of the conditions for advancement. The comfortable story that makes the waiting feel like reasonable strategy is sophisticated and specific and will resist the straightforward identification of the pattern as avoidance. The waiting for permission. The most fundamental form of the waiting is the specific, deeply embedded belief that some form of external permission is required before the genuine expression of your genuine capacity is legitimate. That the promotion, the credential, the title, the external acknowledgement of your readiness, some specific external authorization, must precede the full expression of what you are actually capable of. This belief is almost universally present in people who are waiting for someone to come. It operates at a level below explicit consciousness. Nobody says to themselves, I am waiting for permission. They say, I need the right opportunity. I need to be in the right position. I need the recognition that will make the full expression of my capacity appropriate. But the structure is identical. The external condition that must be met before the internal expression is legitimate. The specific prerequisite that someone else must provide before the full engagement with what you are capable of becomes available. The Stoics would identify this belief as the specific, philosophical confusion between the controllable and the uncontrollable that produces the specific, chronic, entirely unnecessary limitation of genuine capacity. The permission is on the wrong side of the line. It is not yours to control whether it is given. And organizing your full expression around receiving it is organizing your full expression around something that may never arrive. The waiting for the mentor. The mentor waiting is perhaps the most culturally reinforced form of the pattern. The belief that what you need, before you can advance to where your capacity genuinely belongs, is the specific relationship with a more experienced, more connected, more influential person who will see you clearly and choose to invest genuine effort in your advancement. The mentor is real. Genuine mentorship provides genuine value. The Stoics themselves engaged in mentorship. Seneca mentored Lucilius, Epictetus mentored his students, Marcus Aurelius benefited from philosophical guidance across his life. But the waiting for the mentor, the specific positioning of your full expression as dependent on the arrival of this relationship, is the confusion between the valuable accelerant and the necessary prerequisite. The mentor accelerates what is already moving. The mentor cannot start what has not begun. And the person who is waiting for the mentor before beginning has organized themselves so that the mentor, if they arrive, finds nothing to accelerate. The waiting for the right time. This is perhaps the most insidious form of the waiting because it has the most legitimate sounding justification. Timing genuinely matters. Conditions genuinely affect outcomes. The specific assessment of when to act and when to continue preparing is genuinely important. But in the person who is genuinely waiting, who is genuinely organized around the arrival of the external condition rather than the expression of the internal capacity, the right time never arrives. Because the assessment of whether the time is right is being made by the same mind that is invested in the waiting continuing. The same motivated reasoning that maintained Michael's story for 19 years maintains the story that the time is not quite right. That one more element needs to be in place. That the conditions are almost but not quite optimal. Seneca wrote about this with characteristic directness, omnia aliena sunt, tempus tantum nostrum est. Everything else belongs to others, time alone is ours. And the specific implication is clear, the time being waited for is not a condition that will arrive from outside. Time is the only thing genuinely yours. And the use of it is the only expression of genuine ownership available. The waiting for the validation. The specific pattern of not fully expressing what you are capable of until someone has validated that it is worth expressing. The specific, chronic, entirely limiting behavior of holding back, from the creative work, from the professional expression, from the genuine engagement with what is genuinely possible, until the external confirmation that it is worth doing has been received. This is the creative person who does not fully engage with the creative work until someone has confirmed that it is good. The professional who does not fully invest in the direction they believe is right until someone with authority has validated the direction. The person who does not bring the full weight of their genuine capacity to anything until someone has confirmed that the capacity is worth bringing. The validation waiting produces the specific, chronic limitation of everything being done at slightly less than full capacity. Because the full engagement requires the security that the validation was supposed to provide. And the validation has not arrived. And the partial engagement produces partial results. And the partial results do not generate the validation. And the cycle continues. The waiting for rescue. The deepest and most damaging form of the waiting is the specific pattern of organizing your entire situation around the belief that someone, a person, a circumstance, an organization, a relationship, a fortunate convergence of external events, will arrive and change the fundamental conditions of your life in a way that makes the life you want possible. This is the rescue waiting. The specific, desperate, entirely self-defeating belief that the solution to the gap between your current situation and the situation your genuine capacity deserves is going to arrive from outside rather than from inside. The rescue fantasy is culturally pervasive. It is embedded in almost every narrative structure of popular culture. The hero who arrives. The mentor who sees. The circumstance that changes everything. The relationship that rescues from the previous situation. The opportunity that emerges from nowhere and transforms the conditions. These things happen. Genuinely. The external change is real. The opportunity that arrives unexpectedly is real. The relationship that transforms the conditions is real. But organizing your life around the arrival of these things, making the genuine expression of your genuine capacity contingent on their appearance, is the specific, philosophically consequential mistake of locating the engine of your life in the external where it is not available to be placed. The engine is internal. It was always internal. It can only ever be internal. And the person who locates it externally is the person who waits. And waits. And waits. The Stoic philosophical foundation, why doing it alone is not just necessary but genuinely right. The Stoic philosophical tradition was built, at its most fundamental level, around a recognition of the specific location of genuine human agency. And that location is not where the waiting person has been looking for it. Epictetus, from inside conditions of the most complete external disempowerment available, arrived at the recognition that constitutes the philosophical foundation of everything we are exploring. The recognition that genuine agency, the specific, real, practically consequential capacity to produce genuine change in your own life and your own expression of your own capacity, is located inside. Always inside. Regardless of external conditions. This is not the counsel of isolation. The Stoics were social philosophers. They understood human beings as fundamentally social creatures whose genuine flourishing occurs in genuine community. They did not counsel the complete independence of the hermit or the complete self-sufficiency of the isolated individual. What they counseled was the specific recognition that the expression of your genuine capacity is yours. That the building of your genuine character is yours. That the direction of your genuine effort is yours. That the specific quality of how you engage with the specific circumstances of your specific life, including the circumstances that include unhelpful organizations and absent mentors and the complete failure of the external to arrange itself in the way that would most usefully support your advancement, is yours. Not yours in the sense of being easy or uncomplicated or without the genuine influence of external factors. In the sense of being genuinely, irreducibly, unalienably your responsibility. In the sense that no external condition or external failure or external absence of the support that would have been helpful genuinely removes the specific, available, internal capacity to engage fully with what is genuinely yours to express. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire. He had, of all people, the most available and the most significant external support for whatever he chose to do. And he returned, daily, in his private journals, to the recognition that the governance of the empire was his work. That the choices being made were his choices. That the character being built or not built was his character. That the quality of the engagement with the specific demands of the specific day was his engagement, not the empire's, not his advisors, not the systems. The most externally supported person in the ancient world understood that the work was his. Not because external support was unavailable to him, it was maximally available. But because the specific, philosophical recognition that the work is always and only yours is the recognition that makes genuine work possible. The recognition that removes the waiting for the right conditions and the right people and the right time and replaces them with the only genuinely available engine, the person with the capacity, doing the work, now, in the conditions that actually exist. Seneca wrote about this with the practical urgency that his proximity to genuine mortality and genuine power always brought to his philosophical writing. He wrote, Dum differtur vita transcurrit. While we delay, life passes. Not life as an abstraction. Your specific, actual, finite, genuinely unrepeatable life. Passing. While the waiting continues. While the right conditions are still assembling themselves. While the right person is still failing to appear. While the permission is still withheld by the people who have not been asked to withhold it and who are not aware that it is being awaited. While the life passes. This is the Stoic philosophical foundation of doing it alone. Not because doing it alone is more comfortable than doing it with support. Not because external support has no value. But because the alternative, the waiting for someone to come, is not the strategy it presents itself as. It is the specific, philosophical, practically consequential mistake of organizing your life around the arrival of what is not guaranteed to arrive. Of treating the expression of your genuine capacity as contingent on the prior arrangement of external conditions that you cannot control. And this mistake has a cost. A specific, daily, accumulating, ultimately irreversible cost. The passing life. What doing it alone actually means, the precise philosophical understanding. Doing it alone does not mean doing it without any connection to or support from other people. The Stoics were clear about the social nature of genuine human flourishing. The complete isolation of the hermit is not what the philosophical tradition advocates. Genuine relationships, genuine community, genuine mutual engagement with other people's work and lives and development, these are part of the genuinely good human life, not optional supplements to it. Doing it alone means something more specific and more important than the complete absence of other people. It means the expression of your genuine capacity does not wait for other people's action as its prerequisite. That the building of your genuine character is not organized around what other people choose to do or not do in relation to you. That the direction of your genuine effort is determined by your genuine values rather than by the specific failure or presence of the external support that would have been helpful. It means that you are the primary agent of your own life. Not the only person who affects it. Genuinely, many people affect many dimensions of any genuine life. But the primary agent. The one whose choices determine the fundamental direction. The one whose decision about whether to express the genuine capacity fully is not contingent on someone else's prior decision to acknowledge it. Amara's doing it alone did not mean she built her subsequent direction without any other people. She built it with specific people, in specific relationships, engaging with specific external realities. What it meant was that the building began from inside rather than waiting for permission from outside. That the plan she wrote on that morning was her plan, drawn from her genuine assessment of her genuine capacity and her genuine direction, rather than the plan that someone else was supposed to provide. Epictetus's doing it alone did not mean he worked without students or without the intellectual tradition he was engaging with. He taught hundreds of students. He engaged deeply with the philosophical tradition that preceded him. What it meant was that the expression of his genuine philosophical capacity was not organized around the arrival of someone who would free him from slavery before the expression could begin. The external condition did not precede the internal expression. The internal expression preceded, and ultimately transcended, every external condition. This is the precise Stoic understanding of doing it alone. The specific, internal, unconditionally available, not contingent on external conditions expression of your genuine capacity. Not the isolation of it from the world. The sovereignty of it over the world's failure to provide what would have been helpful. The specific practices of doing it alone, what they require and what they build. Doing it alone is not a single decision. It is a practice. A daily, ongoing, consistently maintained practice of expressing your genuine capacity without the prerequisite of external authorization and building your genuine direction without the prerequisite of external support. The practice of the internal commission. The most fundamental practice of doing it alone is the specific act of commissioning yourself. Of deciding, explicitly, honestly, with the full weight of genuine intention, that you are the person who is responsible for the expression of your genuine capacity. That the work you are capable of will be done because you have decided to do it rather than because someone else has created the conditions that make the doing possible. This commissioning is not the dramatic, public announcement of a new philosophy. It is the specific, private, genuine interior decision that changes the fundamental orientation from which everything else proceeds. Amara's commissioning happened on a morning at her desk before anyone else arrived. She sat with the honest recognition that nobody was coming and then made the specific, private, genuine decision that the waiting was over. That the direction was hers to build. That the plan was hers to write. Not with the specific, dramatic, self-aggrandizing quality of someone who has decided they are special and that the world needs to recognize it. With the specific, honest, completely practical quality of someone who has decided that the capacity they possess is their responsibility to express rather than someone else's responsibility to authorize. The internal commission is available now. Not when the conditions are more favorable. Not when the recognition has arrived. Now. In the specific, available, completely genuine present moment of deciding that the work is yours to do. The practice of the self-defined direction. The person who is waiting for someone to come is typically also waiting for someone to define the direction. The organization to assign the path. The mentor to identify the opportunity. The system to reveal the channel through which the genuine capacity should flow. The practice of doing it alone includes the specific, demanding, genuinely important work of defining the direction yourself. Not copying someone else's direction. Not following the system's prescribed path for people with your profile. The specific, genuine, honestly examined determination of what your genuine capacity is pointing toward and what the genuine direction of its full expression actually looks like. This determination requires the honest self-examination that the Stoic tradition is built around. The genuine, patient, rigorous examination of the gap between where you are and where your genuine capacity belongs. Of what you are actually capable of that you are not currently expressing. Of the specific direction that the honest account of your genuine self reveals as the genuine one rather than the comfortable or the socially approvable one. Marcus Aurelius engaged in this examination continuously in his journals. The specific, daily, honest assessment of whether the direction of his engagement with the empire's demands was the genuine expression of his genuine values or the accommodation of the external pressure toward what was easier or more convenient. The self-defined direction that genuine honest self-examination produces is the specific foundation from which doing it alone is actually possible. Because the direction that is genuinely yours, examined honestly, determined carefully, expressed genuinely, does not require external authorization. It requires your engagement. The practice of beginning without conditions. The most immediately available and the most practically important practice of doing it alone is the specific practice of beginning without the conditions being met. Without the permission being given. Without the recognition preceding the expression. Without the opportunity being created by someone else before the engagement begins. Beginning now. In the conditions that actually exist. With the capacity that actually is. Toward the direction that the honest examination has revealed as genuinely yours. Not the perfect beginning. The available one. The one that is possible right now without anyone else doing anything. The first specific, concrete, immediately actionable step that the direction requires and that requires nothing from anyone else as its prerequisite. Seneca's urgency about this is among the most practically relevant things in the entire Stoic philosophical tradition. Recede in te ipsi. Withdraw into yourself. Not in the sense of isolation from the world. In the sense of locating in your own genuine interior the specific, available, unconditionally present engine of genuine action that the waiting has been looking for outside. Begin. Now. Without the conditions. They will never be met in advance. They are met in the engagement. The conditions for the genuine expression of genuine capacity are produced by the genuine expression of genuine capacity, not by the external arrangement of things before the expression begins. The practice of the self-sustained effort. Doing it alone requires the specific, ongoing, daily maintained practice of sustaining the effort through the periods when the external is not providing what the person who was waiting for the external to provide things requires. These periods will be long. The building of anything genuine without the external support that would have accelerated the building is genuinely slower and genuinely more demanding than the building with that support would have been. The absence of the mentor is real. The absence of the institutional support is real. The absence of the external validation that would have confirmed the direction is genuinely difficult to sustain the effort through. The Stoic practices are specifically designed for exactly this. For the sustaining of genuine engagement with genuine direction through the specific, extended, genuinely difficult periods when the external is providing nothing that helps and sometimes providing things that actively hinder. The morning practice of deliberate orientation. The evening practice of honest accounting. The specific, daily renewal of the genuine internal commission that makes the effort genuinely the person's own and therefore genuinely available to be maintained through the conditions that would defeat the effort organized around external support. Marcus Aurelius sustained the effort of genuine philosophical and practical engagement across years of conditions that were specifically designed to make the sustaining difficult. Wars. Plagues. Political betrayal. Personal loss. The continuous, genuinely exhausting demands of governing a complex empire in conditions of genuine crisis. He sustained it not because the external was supporting the sustaining. Often the external was actively opposing it. He sustained it because the internal commission was genuine and the specific, daily, honestly maintained practices of genuine self-examination and genuine value alignment were real enough to make the sustaining possible through the conditions that the external was producing. The practice of building the infrastructure of independence. The person who decides to do it alone is making a decision that has practical implications beyond the psychological. It has structural implications. It requires the specific, deliberately built infrastructure of the person who is not organized around external support but around genuine internal expression. The financial infrastructure that makes genuine independence from institutional dependency possible over time. Not immediately, the building takes time. But the specific, deliberate, consistently maintained work of reducing the specific, structural dependencies that make genuine independence practically unavailable. The knowledge infrastructure. The specific, ongoing, genuinely self-directed learning that builds the capability that genuine independent direction requires. Not the learning that the organization assigns or that the credential system validates. The learning that the genuine direction requires and that the honest self-assessment identifies as the specific gap between current capacity and the capacity the direction demands. The relationship infrastructure. This is perhaps the most important practical element of doing it alone. Not the absence of relationships. The specific, deliberate building of the relationships that support genuine independent expression rather than the relationships that reinforce the waiting. The relationships with people who are themselves doing it, who are themselves expressing their genuine capacity without organizing it around external authorization, and who therefore provide the specific, practical, morale-sustaining evidence that the doing it alone is genuinely possible and genuinely productive. Amara built all of this over the subsequent years. Not quickly. Not without genuine difficulty and genuine setback and the specific, sometimes genuinely discouraging experience of building something without the institutional support that would have accelerated the building. But genuinely. With the specific, accumulating productivity of someone who has finally located the engine in the right place. The practice of expressing without waiting for validation. The specific, daily practice of putting the work into the world before the validation arrives. Of sharing the genuine expression with the genuine commitment to whatever the sharing produces rather than the specific commitment to the validation that would make the sharing feel safe. This practice is the specific operational expression of the internal commission. The genuine expression of genuine capacity without the prerequisite of someone confirming that it is worth expressing. Not recklessly. Not without the honest assessment of the quality and readiness of what is being expressed. But genuinely. Without organizing the expression around the arrival of the validation that makes the expressing feel legitimate. The creative work expressed before the audience has confirmed it is worth creating. The professional direction pursued before the organization has confirmed it is worth pursuing. The idea expressed before the authority has confirmed it is worth expressing. The genuine capacity brought fully to the work before the external recognition has confirmed that the capacity is worth bringing. This is the specific practice that distinguishes the person who is doing it alone from the person who is still waiting. Not the absence of concern about quality. The absence of the waiting for permission to express what is genuine before it has been confirmed as worth expressing. The specific obstacles that will arrive, and the Stoic responses to each. The decision to do it alone, to express your genuine capacity without waiting for external authorization or external support as prerequisites, will encounter specific, predictable, genuinely challenging obstacles. Understanding these obstacles before they arrive is the specific preparation that makes the doing it through them genuinely possible. The obstacle of the doubt. The person who has organized their effort around external validation and then withdraws the organization from external validation will encounter the specific, genuinely difficult experience of doubt without the available external resolution of it. When you are waiting for someone to come, the doubt about whether you are capable and whether the direction is right and whether the effort is worth sustaining is held at a manageable distance by the story that someone will eventually come and confirm. The validation is anticipated even if it has not arrived. And the anticipation of it provides the specific, fragile, entirely borrowed confidence that makes the waiting bearable. When you have decided to do it alone, the doubt has no anticipated external resolution. No one is coming to confirm the direction. No one is going to validate the capacity before the expression of it has produced the evidence that the validation would provide. The doubt is present. And it is present in the genuinely uncomfortable form of genuine uncertainty without the comfortable story that the uncertainty is temporary because confirmation is anticipated. The Stoic response to this obstacle is the specific, philosophical recalibration of what genuine confidence actually is and where it genuinely lives. Genuine confidence is not the product of external validation. It is the product of the specific, honest, internal assessment of the genuine capacity and the genuine direction. It is available in the specific form that the honest self-examination produces, not perfect certainty, not the elimination of all doubt, but the genuine, evidence-based assessment that the capacity is real and the direction is genuinely yours and the expression of it is worth the uncertainty it involves. This confidence is built through the doing rather than the waiting. Through the specific, accumulating evidence that the genuine expression of genuine capacity produces outcomes that the waiting was not producing. Through the growing, direct, experiential knowledge of what you are actually capable of when the full engagement with what is genuinely yours replaces the management of the conditions for the external authorization that was supposed to precede it. The obstacle of the judgment. The person who begins doing it alone, who begins expressing genuine capacity without waiting for permission, will encounter judgment. Some of it genuine and useful. Some of it the specific, social resistance that any departure from the established waiting produces in the people who are themselves waiting and who therefore experience the departure as an implicit critique of their own continued waiting. The Stoic response to this is the specific, daily practiced, philosophically grounded orientation that Marcus Aurelius returned to continuously. The recognition that the judgment of others is genuinely not yours to control. That the response to your genuine expression is on the wrong side of the line, not yours, not subject to your governance, not the appropriate organizing principle of your choices. What is yours? The quality of the expression. The honesty of the engagement. The integrity of the direction. The genuine commitment to the work rather than to the management of the judgment of the work. What is not yours? What the judgment produces. Whether the judgment is favorable or unfavorable. Whether the people whose judgment you would most value are capable of genuine assessment rather than the specific, automatic social resistance that departure from the norm produces. Make the expression genuine. Release the judgment to whoever will make it. This is the Stoic response to the obstacle of judgment. The obstacle of the loneliness. Doing it alone has a specific, genuine, not to be minimized dimension of loneliness. The specific experience of expressing genuine capacity without the company of the external authorization and the external support and the external validation that would have made the expression feel genuinely sanctioned. The Stoics did not pretend this was not real. They were honest about the specific difficulty of the genuinely philosophical life, the life organized around genuine internal expression rather than external approval, in a world that is primarily organized around external approval. Marcus Aurelius was genuinely lonely in specific ways that his journals make visible. Genuinely isolated in the specific sense of inhabiting a philosophical orientation that almost no one around him shared at the depth he inhabited it. He did not resolve this loneliness by abandoning the orientation. He resolved it by the specific, Stoic understanding that the loneliness of genuine internal orientation is a different quality of experience from the loneliness of the waiting. The waiting produces the specific loneliness of someone who needs something from outside and is not receiving it. The internal orientation produces the specific solitude of someone who has found the genuine interior and who is genuinely present to it. These are not the same. And the specific relationships that are available to the person doing it alone, the relationships with people who are themselves doing it, with the philosophical tradition that has been doing it across centuries, with the work itself in the specific, alive, genuinely engaged way that the full expression of genuine capacity makes possible, these relationships provide a quality of genuine company that the waiting, for all its social activity, does not. The obstacle of the setback. The person doing it alone will encounter genuine setbacks. The expression that is not received as it was hoped. The direction that encounters the specific, genuine resistance of the world's indifference or opposition. The effort that does not produce the anticipated outcome in the anticipated time frame. The Stoic response to the setback is the specific, philosophically grounded practice of using the setback rather than being defeated by it. Of examining it honestly for the genuine information it contains about the gap between the current expression and the expression that the genuine direction requires. Of adjusting based on the genuine information rather than interpreting the setback as evidence that the doing it alone was a mistake and the waiting should resume. Marcus Aurelius used his setbacks. The military campaigns that did not go as planned. The political situations that produced outcomes he did not intend. The personal losses that arrived without warning. He did not interpret any of them as evidence that the internal orientation was wrong. He used them as the specific, directly available material for the genuine philosophical development that only genuine encounter with genuine difficulty produces. The setback is information, not verdict. The specific information that the genuine direction, genuinely expressed, requires in order to develop toward the level of expression that the genuine capacity is actually pointing toward. Use it. Adjust. Continue. What doing it alone produces, the complete transformation. Amara built the thing she had been waiting for someone to give her. Not immediately. Over years of the specific, daily, genuinely demanding work of the person who has decided that the doing is theirs. The specific quality of what she built was different from what the waiting had been producing. Not because the external conditions were eventually more favorable, they were, in specific ways, more favorable after the building had produced the evidence of genuine capacity that preceded the external recognition. But primarily because the thing built from inside has a quality that the thing built from the outside cannot have. It was genuinely hers. In the specific, irreducible, philosophically significant sense that the thing built by the person who has commissioned themselves and expressed themselves and directed themselves has a quality of genuine ownership that the thing that was supposed to be given has never had. She was not waiting for it to be given. She had built it. And the building had produced something that the waiting never could have produced. Not just the external achievement. The specific, interior, genuinely transformative quality of someone who has discovered, through direct experience rather than theory, that the engine was always inside. That the capacity was always present. That the waiting had not been waiting for anything that was not already available. She had been waiting for herself to begin. She had finally begun. Epictetus understood this from inside conditions that made the beginning genuinely, completely difficult in ways that most people reading this will never encounter. And he began anyway. Without permission. Without external authorization. Without the arrival of anyone who was going to change the external conditions before the expression became possible. He expressed. He built. He taught. He produced one of the most consequential philosophical contributions in human history. From inside slavery. Without anyone coming to make the conditions more favorable. Nobody came. He did it anyway. This is the specific, philosophically grounded, practically applicable understanding that the Stoic tradition has been offering to everyone who encounters it with the genuine willingness to receive it. Nobody is coming. Not as a reason for despair. As the specific, liberating, completely transformative recognition that the engine was always yours. That the capacity was always yours. That the expression was always yours to begin. Without waiting. Without permission. Without the arrival of the external authorization that the waiting had been organized around. Now. The beginning of the doing, what this moment requires. Right now, in this specific moment, there is something that you are capable of that you are not currently expressing at its full level. There is a direction that your genuine capacity is pointing toward that you have been waiting for someone to sanction or support or create the conditions for. Nobody is coming to sanction it. Nobody is coming to support it in the specific way that the waiting has been organized around. Nobody is coming to create the conditions before your engagement begins. This is not a tragedy. It is the specific, liberating recognition that the Stoic tradition has been pointing toward since Epictetus sat in his cell in slavery and understood that nobody was coming for him and began building one of the most significant philosophical contributions in human history. What is yours? The capacity. The direction. The internal commission. The beginning. What is not yours? The external authorization. The mentor who was supposed to arrive. The organizational recognition that was supposed to precede the full expression. The specific, comfortable story that the arrival of these things was reasonable strategy rather than the perpetuation of the waiting. Start. Not with the perfect conditions. With the available ones. Not with the complete plan. With the honest beginning. Not after the permission arrives. Before it. The permission is yours to give yourself. It was always yours to give yourself. Give it. Now. The building begins in the specific, available, unconditionally present moment of the internal commission being genuinely made. Make it. Subscribe to Stoic Ascension right now. Turn on your notifications. Every single video on this channel is built for exactly this depth of genuine philosophical engagement and this quality of practically applicable urgency. The kind that names what most people are doing without knowing they are doing it, and that provides the specific philosophical grounding and the specific practices that genuinely address what is being named. What comes after this builds directly on everything you just heard. Every video goes deeper. Every video takes the practice further into the complete work of genuinely expressing the genuine capacity that only the doing it produces. Amara waited for 7 years. She stopped waiting on a morning at her desk before anyone else arrived. She wrote the plan. Nobody gave it to her. She built what she had been waiting for. You have been waiting for someone to come. They are not coming. The capacity is yours. The direction is yours. The commission is yours to give. Give it. Begin. Now.